This is Doug DeMuro, and today we're going to discuss the 8 best fun used cars for $30,000 or less. Even in today's market, 30 grand still buys a surprisingly good amount of car. So today I'm going to tell you what I would be looking at if I was interested in spending around 30 grand for a fun car. Let's go. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era, now with free listings. You can list your car for free and auction it on Cars and Bids. And we've had some great sales recently, including this Shelby GT350, which sold for $57,000, this fantastic Porsche 911 Turbo 996, which sold for $53,000, and this wonderful AP2 Honda S2000, which brought over $35,000. If you're looking for a great place to buy or sell an enthusiast car from the modern era, the 1980s and up, Cars and Bids is the place to do it, with daily auctions and great selection at carsandbids.com. All right, so let's get started. Fun cars for 30 grand. Now, 10 grand, you know, you don't have much choice, especially in this market. 20 grand starts to open things up, but $30,000 does buy you some pretty cool stuff, some truly good cars. So here's what I would get for 30 grand. Now, this list is in alphabetical order because each car on this list has sort of a different thing. Some are sports sedans, sports cars, SUVs, trucks. You'll see what I mean. Let's get started. Okay, so fun used cars for under 30 grand. I'm gonna start off with the E60 BMW M5 with a manual transmission. Yes, the very same car I reviewed like 3 years ago, and I said it is a terrible reliability disaster. It will blow up. Never buy one of these cars. I still feel that way, but 15 grand or 12 grand will buy you an automatic that has not had any of the reliability modifications performed. 30 grand will buy you a rare manual transmission car that has had the reliability modifications performed. And that's a big deal because at the end of the day, if that car was reliable, it's a V10 naturally aspirated BMW sedan. So you do the rod bearing fix, you do the throttle actuators, a few other things, and this is a pretty desirable car. Now that stuff's expensive to do, and that's why you gotta spend more in order to get a good one, but that's cool. Then add in a manual transmission, you got a manual V10. It's crazy, the concept of it is crazy. And so I think that's a pretty desirable car if you get a good one. And I could see values of those really starting to climb for nice examples, because so many were automatic transmissions, with high miles, no reliability mods performed. Get a great one and you'll love it. Okay, next car on my list of fun used cars for 30 grand or less, Dodge Challenger SRT8. You can pick up a Challenger SRT8 like a normal 13 or 14 model for under $30,000, or like a nice 11 or 12, like super low miles. And the cool thing about the Challenger is they never changed how it looked. So unless you kind of know what to look for, they all look, since 2009 or 8, whatever, they all look like the same car. And the SRT model, I mean, 30 grand if you look at like a 2-year-old one, gets you like a crappy V6, nothing you want. But if you go back to 11, 12, 13, 14, the SRT8 model had well over 400 horsepower. It had that cool Challenger look that the new one still has. And you can get them for 30 grand or less. And these are pretty reliable cars. And in situations where they aren't reliable, parts are easy to come by and they're relatively cheap to fix. This isn't like BMWs or Porsches or Audis where it can be expensive to maintain. These cars were relatively easy to work on with a lot of parts availability. And truthfully, it's a lot of car for just under $30,000. Especially because it seems like a new car and it still has a lot of power and it feels muscular, and I think that's a great buy for around 30 or less. Okay, next up, cool cars for $30,000 or less. This is a little bit of a weird one, a little bit of a Doug weird car pick. Dodge Ram SRT10, the Viper powered pickup. And I put this on the list. These are a little over $30,000. They're like in the low 30s. You can probably find one with higher miles under 30 that's not like messed up, just has higher miles. But that's about where they are. They're like 28 to 34,000, I would say. I put this on here because a Viper is no longer available in this price range. There was a long time when you could buy a Dodge Viper for $30,000. That's no longer the case. So here's the next best thing, which is a pickup truck that uses the Viper powertrain, a V10, and a manual transmission. And it's pretty insane. And a lot of pickups are becoming more and more insane. There's this whole electric pickup truck thing But I think this stands out for being uniquely insane with a Viper powertrain. Of course, I primarily recommend the short trucks, which had a manual transmission. The long trucks, the four doors, were more practical, but they all had an automatic. But the short truck is a V10 Viper engine and a manual transmission in a pickup. It's a ridiculous thing, and I think it's a lot of car for 30 grand. Okay, next up, another great car for under $30,000. That would be the Ford Mustang GT from 2015 model year and up. This is the S550 Mustang, they call it, with the Coyote V8. I love these cars. That's just all there is to it. I've driven a lot of Camaros, a lot of Challengers, and a lot of Mustangs, and I've come away thinking that the Mustang is the best of them. I like how it looks the best. The engine is fantastic. Certainly the best engine of this crew. Great gear lever situation. I highly recommend a manual transmission. It's a great car. It's a really fantastically great car. And I really do believe that that is probably the best muscle car bargain on the market today. Those SRT8 Challengers are also very cool, and I think they have more power, but the Mustangs are just more enjoyable to drive. They're more fun through the corners. They have better technology. They're more modern, and they still feel and drive fantastically. And if I was getting any Mustang, frankly, I love the GT350, but there's so much money. It's very, very, very appealing to get a GT from this era with a manual and a V8, and a convertible if you can find one, although they're pretty uncommon with a stick shift. But this is a great car. They've remained relatively reliable. There's a lot of them out there, so they're relatively easy to find. And I think they're going to hold their value relatively well because manual V8, naturally aspirated, is kind of going to stay desirable as the world shifts toward electric. Okay, next up, fun used cars for $30,000 or less. The Honda S2000. It's kind of funny to come off the Mustang, the Challenger, the Ram SRT10, the M5, all these big engines, and talk S2000. And it's especially funny to talk S2000 for 30 grand. Those cars were in the 30s 15 years ago, and we thought by now they'd be 12, but that hasn't happened. And the reason for that is manual transmission has stayed very, very desirable. Analog cars have stayed desirable. The two-seat rear-wheel drive Roadster has largely gone away, and the S2000 remains a pretty damn cool car. It's a lot of fun to drive. It's exciting to throw around. It's perfectly sized. It's a good powertrain, very reliable, a lot of aftermarket support, parts support, and these are just cool cars. And the other cool thing is you can really hold your value in one of these. You can buy one, you can drive it for years and sell it for about what you paid. They've just kind of seemed to have hit a floor, and they're not really depreciating all that much. 30 grand may seem like a lot for a 240 horsepower four-cylinder car with not that much torque. But it's a fun driving experience, and like I said, you can just kind of sample it and move on in a year or two if you don't want it. I think the S2000 is a great car. It always kind of has been, and it remains great. And I know they're expensive for what they are, but they offer a lot of benefits, including a great driving experience. Okay, next up, cool cars for 30 grand or less. How about the W204 Mercedes C63 AMG? That's this car here, sold from 2008 to I think like 2013 or 14 or so. I love these cars. This was probably my favorite AMG car to use the 6.2 liter naturally aspirated engine, the SLS, I guess also. The cool thing here is it's also one of the last cars to use this engine. And so in the world of going away from naturally aspirated engines, this car is already starting to kind of gain a status as, you know, the last gasp with a big engined German muscle car. The cool thing I liked about these C63s is they were made in several body styles. There was a coupe and a sedan here in the States. There was also a wagon in Europe. But they were nice looking cars. The regular C-Class Camaro was very nice looking. The AMG had some great upgrades that made it even better. They have a good powertrain that has a lot of muscle to them, and they're good sized. So many cars have become larger and larger and larger, and it's just annoying. The C63 was kind of the last C-Class that was like a good, reasonable size to kind of toss it around and really have some fun without relying more on driver aids to do that because to counteract the weight of the car. I really love these cars. Now, the problem with these was they had the head bolt engine. The 6.2 liter NA V8, for as cool as it was, being a big old NA engine, it had this fatal flaw where the head bolts could fail and the whole engine goes. So you have to get that fixed. There is a fix, it's a few $1,000s, but once the head bolt replacement has been done, the car is tremendously desirable. And I think that they're gonna always kind of maintain a reputation as the last gasp with this big NA V8. And they were just a really cool era of C63. After this, the engine size sort of starts to decline a little bit. The car was still great, but there was something very special about the W204 from 08 to 12, 13. It's a really cool car. Okay, next up, fun used cars for $30,000. This one always makes my list when I'm talking about this kind of stuff. 996 Porsche 911. This was the 911 made from 99 to 05. It's getting harder to find one for 30 grand, but they're still out there. And everybody talks about, well, these cars are ugly. They have the ugly front end design. But the thing is, it still drives like a 911, and it's still fun like a 911. These cars also had a little bit of a fatal flaw with their powertrains. The IMS, the intermediate shaft issue, affected a small portion of cars, but enough that if it blew up your engine. It was a big deal. Once you replace that and get it fixed, you have a very good, reliable, modern era Porsche that still feels fast, is still fun to drive, and I love these cars. And I still think they're one of the great cars at this price point, and I really, really highly recommend them. There will be a day in not so long when 30 grand won't buy you one anymore, but we're not there yet. And for now, while you can still buy a modern Porsche 911 for $30,000, you should. And finally, last car on my list of the 8 best fun used cars for 30 grand or less, the Toyota 4Runner. This is going to be kind of a surprise. A lot of people use the 4Runner as like daily family transportation, but it's also a very capable off-roader. And I'm specifically referring to the 4Runner that came out in 2010, but particularly with the facelift beginning in 2014. These are very capable cars with good power, good interior space, and so you can use it as a family car, but it's also very, very good off-road, and that's where you can have your fun with this. You can go take your whole family off-roading, take like a grill setup, go cook out off-road. It's a cool car for that. And unlike a Jeep, which Chrysler reliability and quality kind of falls apart after a little while, 30 grand, you're looking at a several-year-old vehicle. Toyota, this is going to be strong for years and years to come, and that's why they hold their value so well. You can still get a 2014 and up 4Runner for 30 grand or less. And if you go back to 2010, you have even more of an option, but I liked the facelift in 14. I thought it was ugly for years, but I've come around on it. I think it looks really cool now. And I think these are really, really cool trucks. Now, you can't quite afford a TRD Pro model for $30,000, which is like the coolest off-roadiest version, but you can get close with some other TRD trims, and frankly, even a regular 4Runner with four-wheel drive is a pretty capable vehicle. And these are really hot right now, 4Runners in general. I love them. I think they're great. And I think that it's a good place to put 30 grand. Plus, in today's market, they're not losing value. And so they've remained like completely flat. You can buy one, keep it for a while, off-road it, beat it to hell, modify it a little bit, and sell it for about what you paid, which is kind of the cool thing you can do with Toyota SUVs, but especially right now. But there you go. That's my list. Those are the 8 best fun used cars for 30 grand or less. The 8 cars I would buy at this price point. Some trucks, some cars, some sedans, some SUVs. There's a lot of good stuff out there for 30 grand. It buys you a lot of car, and these are my suggestions for what to get if you have that budget and you're looking for something fun.